Good morning, everyone. For all the people that are new here because of the program, I'll start to give you a little introduction. My name's Ken Vinton. I'm the chairman of TRIAD, going on my 10th year now. What we have, TRIAD, if somebody doesn't know what TRIAD is a combination of the Halifax Police Department, Halifax Fire Department, Tim Cruz, the district attorney in Brockton, and Joe McDonald, who is the sheriff of Plymouth County. Those four people make up what we have here every month, which we meet the first Tuesday, unless there's a holiday, we meet the first Tuesday of every month. So anyone that's new here today, you're welcome to come to TRIAD. It's not open just for Halifax. It's for everyone that wants to come to the meeting. And I am in charge of getting speakers, and every month we have a different speaker of various natures. I don't do the speaking for realtors or anyone that's running for anything at all, because I don't feel that TRIAD is something that we want for that situation. So all of the speakers are people of interest, people that you might like to hear. And if I run out of speakers, that I haven't so far out of 10 years, but if I run out of any, I ask the different people that show up for the meetings, do you have a situation? Do you want to have a speaker? Can you think of someone you might want to talk to? Most of the speakers we have, I try to mix them up, so there's different ones, but I try not to have too much on health or situations that you have at home. When you come to a meeting with TRIAD, you don't want to hear all about health problems and that type of stuff. So I try to stay away from that end of it. This meeting we're having today is a special one. It's one that I've never had before, never been involved with it, but the Halifax Police Department said for me not to worry about it. They're going to take care of the whole thing. So I got my coffee, and I felt pretty good about that. But I'm going to, does anyone have any questions right now before we start? Okay, then I'm going to turn the program over to the Halifax Police Chief. Where are you, Joe?
So, good morning, everyone. My name is John Schaafs. I'm the Police Chief for Halifax. I'd like to welcome everyone here today. Obviously, this is not the normal crowd for TRIAD, as Ken spoke about. TRIAD, they meet the second Tuesday of every month, and they usually, first Tuesday of every month, and they'll have a presenter speaking on things that Ken feels is important to the senior community in Halifax. We've had gentlemen to speak about cranberry bogs, gentlemen speaking about their trips to the Appalachian Mountains and so forth. So, and sometimes Ken runs out of presenters. So he had reached out and asked if I could think of something that'd be useful to the community. Because of the recent activity that we've had with black bears, our presenter this morning had done a presentation to the Southeastern Mass Chiefs at the beginning of the season in this early spring, and had warned us about the increased activity that law enforcement agencies and so forth we're going to be facing with the black bear population. So I thought it'd be a great subject matter to speak about. Obviously, since the meeting was scheduled, you've seen all the recent activity on social media, all the emotional posts on social media. So I think this is it was a perfect timing for this presentation. So I'd like to welcome everybody this morning. Our presenter this morning is Mr. Dave Wattles. He's with MassWildlife, and I'll turn it over to Dave, and he'll do his presentation, and then I believe he'll open up for questions from the people here. I think he's frozen. Dave, are you there? Dave, are you there? Gotta love technology. I will not be dancing if Dave can't make his presentation, just or singing. So hopefully you have somebody else to fill in. So while we wait until Caesar sets this up again.
Will he appear waiting for you?
No, he's supposed to be calling in to the link that Caesar gave him, but I think there might be some technical difficulties, so see what happens.
Maybe he's trying to get the bears.
Maybe.
All right, try it now.
Hi, Dave, you there? Okay, yeah, I think you're on mute. Hold on. Okay, try it now.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you fine. All right, Dave, take it over. Thank you.
All right. Just give me a second here, folks. I'll share my screen with you. And then we'll get going. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Waddles. I am the black bear and fur bear biologist with the Division of Fish and Wildlife. This talk, the chief contacted me several months ago about potentially talking to you about the increase in bear sightings in your community, what that means in terms of the relative threat to anyone in the public, and what then you can do to learn to coexist and prevent conflict with bears. This presentation is going to give you some information on basic bear biology, what we're doing as an agency to monitor the population, but then how their biology influences their behavior, contributes to the conflict, but what you as individuals and a community can do to prevent the conflict that you experience and hear about with bears. The public often looks to us at the division, me, to try to solve bear problems for you. And the reality of it is that I cannot do anything. You'll get this message loud and clear through this talk, particularly at the end, that I can't do anything to solve the problems as long as individuals and you as a community, not just Halifax, every town in your area continues to provide food to bears. I'm sure you've seen on social media 1,000 times over the last couple months people taking pictures of bears at their bird feeders. That is what causes the conflict. So rather than commenting on those posts of, oh, how cute, oh, I wish the bear came to my bird feeder, I need people to be telling people to take the bird feeders in, to stop feeding the bears, because that's what's causing the conflict. So with that, I'll get into the presentation. So what we're talking about here is black bears. Black bears are the only bears that are found in Massachusetts or anywhere in the eastern United States. Adult males are solitary and can be very large. They can easily weigh over 450, 500 pounds, and they can reach that size by 3 or 4 years of age. Adult females can be anywhere from, and this is mature females, from around 140 to over 300 pounds. Those 140, 160 pound females tend to be those that are living in natural forested areas where they're feeding on natural foods. The larger ones that are, 215, 240, up to 300 pounds tend to be females that are living in suburban areas, getting a lot of human associated foods that supplements their diet and makes them much larger. I'm going to talk about the 2-year life cycle of bears in terms of the relationship between the mother and her cubs. I'll say just quickly, because they're giving birth to cubs every other year. And so in the start of this cycle, basically when cubs reach about a 1.5 years of age, they disperse. They leave their mother in April and May, and they're on their own for the rest of their lives. This is just ahead of the breeding season or mating season for bears, which takes place in the early summer months and peaks in June. This is when adult males are moving all over the place, trying to find females that are receptive to mating and trying to mate with as many as they can. At this time, the female's egg is fertilized, but the pregnancy doesn't continue to develop. The egg develops, but a little bit, but it doesn't implant in the uterus, and so the pregnancy stalls. This is called delayed implantation. And so basically for the rest of the summer, the female will be doing bear things, finding food, moving around with these fertilized eggs in her, but she's not developing her pregnancy. Right about now, right around the 1st of November, her physiology changes, and it tells her it's time to go to the den. Our pregnant females den more or less like clockwork around November 1st. And this is where now the egg implants in her uterus, the pregnancy actually begins to develop, and she then gives birth in the middle of winter. So she gives birth to her cubs in the middle of January into early February. And then for the next several months, she's in the den, she's raising them and keeping those cubs alive and allowing them to grow based only on her milk. She's not leaving the den to eat. So she's surviving on her fat reserves and she's producing for her cubs so that they can grow. Around the 1st of April, they emerge and they're around 6 to 8 pounds. For the next 7 or 8 months, they're active. She's showing them where to find food, what is food, how to avoid dangers, and how to essentially be a bear. The cubs are weaned by late summer, and they tend to enter the den sometimes later. So they will den as 1-year-old cubs with their mother again. And they tend to den later in November into December, potentially even January, depending on conditions. They den with their mother at that age. They tend to emerge sometime in February into March. And for the next couple months, they remain with their mom. She's again showing them how to find spring foods that they may not have been exposed to the previous year. And then they disperse again prior to that breeding season. So I'm going to talk a little bit about bear diet and habitat use. Bears are omnivores, meaning they eat both plants and meat, but 99% of their diet is plant-based. They're not a true predator. They're not going to chase down prey the way a bobcat, a fisher, or a coyote does. And they're highly opportunistic, basically meaning they'll take advantage of any food sources, as you'll see. In the spring, their food tends to be the first emergent vegetation. So that first lush green vegetation that comes up in the spring, it's very digestible, it's high in protein. And there's some species like skunk cabbage, like you see on the right, that are really important spring foods for bears. They'll also eat leftover acorns or hickory nuts that fell in the fall and overwintered. And they'll also feed on carrion, so the carcasses of dead animals at this time of year. They will opportunistically, and this is really their own, their only meat that they regularly get in the wild, other than dead animals, is preying on deer fawns. So shortly after they're born, deer fawns are highly vulnerable to predation, and bears will take advantage of that. Food tends to be scarce in the spring, so we tend to see a lot of use of human-associated foods in the spring, particularly bird feeders. And throughout the year, bears are going to be found wherever they can find food. So in the spring, they tend to be found in wetlands where these lush green vegetation tends to be most lush and nutritious. Bears' diet changes throughout the season and into the summer as different foods become available. They'll take advantage of it. So colonial insects like ants, bees, wasps, they'll dig in the ground or dig into rotten logs and stumps to dig out their nests. They'll eat those insects, their larvae, honey, and will readily feed on those. Berries, or what's known as soft mast, are an extremely important natural food for bears. So right from strawberries to blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, grapes, cherries, they'll eat and consume all of those. Unfortunately, they'll also readily consume on agricultural crops, particularly corn and apples, and they can do a very large amount of damage, particularly in corn, where they can flatten large amounts of fields as they just sit there and gorge themselves on corn in those fields. In the summer, they can be found in upland forests, logged areas. Logged areas are a great place for summer food for bears because of the down stumps and logs provide places for ants and other colonial insects to nest, and they also tend to have a lot of berry plants. Wetlands, fields, and orchards are other places where bears can find food. In late summer and fall, bears enter what's called hyperphagia. This is a period where essentially they have a compulsion to eat as much food as possible to try to gain the weight they need, the fat reserves, to survive hibernation. They'll continue to feed on crops at this time, but a critical food source for them is in the fall are nutting trees. So oak trees that produce acorns, beech nuts, hickory nuts are very important fall foods for bears. They'll also feed on deer carcasses in the hunting season, and we tend to find them in upland forests, fields, and orchards at this time of year. As people generally know, bears hibernate in winter. And when do they do this? As I said, those pregnant sows, it's pretty much like clockwork. Right about now, I would expect most of them to be in the den now, if not within the next couple of days. All other bears, both females with 1-year-old cubs and males, it tends to be later into November, December, potentially even January, depending on conditions. And really the variability of that is due to the availability of food and weather. And weather simply from the standpoint of access to food. Bears are fully capable of being active all winter and having no issue with the cold just as much, if not more, than most of our animals that remain active in winter. But as primarily a vegetarian, there's not much food available to them in winter. If food is scarce, they tend to den earlier. If it's abundant, it can potentially be later. Every year, we get reports of bears that remain active all winter because there's abundant food for them. And that food tends to be bird feeders. They provide a reliable source of food where a bear can continue to feed all winter, and it precludes their need to den. And they remain in the den for 4 to 5 months. They don't eat or drink at all during this period, and they don't excrete any waste. So they have huge reductions in their metabolic rates, and kind of their systems tend to pause where they're just living off their fat reserves. I kind of already got into this a little bit, but why do bears hibernate? As I said, it's an adaptation to the seasonal food shortages. Again, as a vegetarian or primarily a vegetarian, there's basically no food. They can't digest the twigs and stems and branches that deer and moose, for example, eat, or rabbits eat. So there's really not much food available to them in winter. What this means is they have to gain all the weight and the fat reserves they need to survive that entire denning period in those few months they're active. Because of this, they're evolutionarily adapted to search for and take advantage of calorie-rich food whenever it's available. And unfortunately, this is what leads to conflict with people. We as individuals and as communities, and every community in Massachusetts does this, readily supply calorie-rich foods around our homes in the form of bird feeders, unsecured garbage, and other foods. And this is what bears are going to take advantage of. I'll talk about this a lot, but these aren't bad bears that take advantage of these foods. Every single bear will do that. It is just the inherent nature of bears to take advantage of these easy meals if they're available to them. This is our range of where bears are in Massachusetts. Historically, bears were found all the way to the coast. This is in pre-European colonization times. At that time, basically, European colonists cut down the forest and turned it into farmland in Massachusetts, so the loss of habitat. Additionally, bears were hunted year-round. There were bounties on bears. They were seen as a pest and a predator in agricultural terms, and so basically they were shot year-round. Our agency didn't exist at that time to control and regulate hunting. So our bear population was driven back just to a small remnant population in the northern Berkshires, and it's the slow growth and recovery of that population as forests grew back, as we regulated when bears can be hunted in Massachusetts, that has allowed for the slow and progressive growth of the population that we're still experiencing today with these bears that are now moving into your area and into Southeast Mass. The gray area here is where we know we have females producing cubs and actively reproducing. The brown area is really kind of where we're kind of expanding into. There may be a female or two in there, but we really don't get that many reports in those areas. And it's really the expansion of females that is going to determine when we have really bear growth in any area, the growth of the population. The bears in your area are predominantly young males that are dispersing out of our established range, trying to find a territory where they don't have to compete with the dominant males in our established range. One of the best ways to look at the growth of our population over time is to see where bears were taken in our hunting season. So if we go back to 1980, there were just a handful of bears, 10, taken in the northern Berkshires. By 1990, the population had substantially grown in density, and we'd taken bears throughout much of the northern Berkshires. By 2000, bears had crossed the Connecticut River and into eastern Mass. They'd crossed the Mass Pike and were starting to establish themselves in Connecticut, where they're now growing very rapidly because they have no hunting, no regulation of the population in Connecticut. You can now see by 2005, we're starting to take 4, 5, 6, 7 bears in individual towns, and as the population is really starting to increase in density very rapidly. By 2010, we're regularly taking bears in eastern Mass, and our population is now beginning to grow in these areas. Population continues to increase in western Mass and continues to expand in the east. And so this is happening over and over again over time. And so basically, by now, what we're seeing happening now is what we were happening maybe 25, 30 years ago in western Mass. And so in Worcester County, our bear population is starting to experience that very, very rapid growth of the population that we saw take place in western Mass. And now you're starting to see in your portion of state where bears are now pushing into new areas as the population continues to grow. Another way we can know where bears are occurring in the state is by looking at calls to either us or to the environmental police. The environmental police, as a law enforcement agency, all their calls are automatically recorded. And so it provides very detailed and accurate information on where bear calls came in. And so you can see, the majority of the calls match up with our established range. This here in Southeast Mass could be a single bear that accounts for all those phone calls as it wanders through. You see a cluster of calls in Northeast Mass. I know, for example, that was 2 bears that caused a lot of issues in those communities. Again, similar to your area where people aren't used to dealing with bears, a single bear can generate a lot of phone calls. And over time, we're starting to see an increase in calls in eastern Mass as bears start to push. But this is kind of how we know where bears are in the state. When I get this data for next year, there's obviously going to be an enormous number of calls in Southeast Mass, as the couple of bears that have moved through your community have generated lots and lots and lots of sightings all over Southeast Mass. But it really is still only maybe 1 or 2 bears, 2 to 3 bears in that area. So we've got information as to where bears are in the state, that our population is growing. But as the person responsible for managing the population, making decisions on whether we need to adjust our hunting seasons, either increase it or decrease it to ensure we have a healthy bear population, I need more detailed information. So to do that, we have a long-term monitoring project that we use to learn about our black bear population. And we do that through tracking and collaring them with radio tracking collars. Each spring, our regional offices are deploying these traps. These are 55-gallon drums that are welded together. In the back of that, there's a bait bag. When the bear climbs into the drums to pull the bait bag, that door falls down and closes behind him. And even a large male like this that probably weighs 400 some odd pounds will squeeze himself into that trap. Once the bear is in there, we can tranquilize it or immobilize it using a syringe on the end of a pole, and we can immobilize them through the holes in the side of the trap. Pull them out of the trap, and we can then work them up. We also, on the right, you can see we'll opportunistically take advantage of when a female with cubs may wander into a highly urban or suburban area, and it might be a place that we wouldn't be normally trapping. And so it's an opportunity for us to collar an animal in a location where we otherwise might not be able to get information on how bears are interacting with these heavily developed locations. Once the bear is pulled out of the trap, we can assess its condition, obviously determine whether it's male or female. All the bears are given ear tags with unique numbers on them that allows us to say if the bear is taken in the hunting season at a later date, it's involved in a vehicle collision or perhaps some nuisance activity, we can identify, when we first handled that bear back to our records here. The females get tracking collars. So we are using two types of tracking collars. One is a conventional older technology radio collar that basically just puts out a pulsing frequency. And so we have to go out in the field with a receiver and an antenna, tune into her specific frequency, and then we can determine, generally speaking, where she is and track her that way. But it requires us to go out into the field to actually do that. Very time consuming. The collars that you see them using here are actually GPS collars. They're equipped with a GPS unit on them. It takes a location every 45 minutes. And so we're learning about where these bears are basically 24 hours a day, all year round, getting very detailed information on their movements, where they're crossing roads, what types of habitats they're using, how much they're interacting with development versus using natural habitats. And so getting a wealth of information from these collars, as you'll see in a little bit. Now, if one of the bears were to die, and this is a critical piece of information for us, how long since we've originally captured that animal, until she dies, what was the cause of mortality, those collars put out a slower pulsing signal. And so I know if I hear a slow pulse, likely that animal's died. I'll go in, I'll try to locate the animal, determine the cause of death. That's a piece of information we need to learn about the population. If she survives, we track them to their winter dens each year. So here's an example of some different den types bears use. You can see in the top left, it tends to be a rock cave. I think a lot of the general public has the idea that this is what a bear den is, but in reality, it's pretty seldom they use this type of den. More often than not, on the left, you can see a hollow in a very large tree, or potentially a hollow at the base of that tree. It can just be underneath the logs of a fallen tree next to the root mass. They'll make a little nest there. It can be in dense briar or brush, in a log pile. There's no shortage of potential dens out there for bears to use, and a lot of them aren't nearly as secure as you would think. Or they can dig and enlarge a hole in the ground underneath a stump or fallen tree, where they'll enlarge a hole and make a little burrow den in the ground. So we sneak on these dens and try to immobilize the bear just like we do when they're in the traps. Once the female goes to sleep, we can pull her out. We can assess her body condition, look for any injuries, take measurements. We can replace her collar, refit her collar as needed, and generally just assess her condition. About half of our females have given birth to cubs. So after about 6 or 8 weeks, we can work on these bears, and the cubs are small enough that we can handle them at this time. And so basically we can determine now how many cubs she gave birth to, what is the sex of those cubs, how big are they, and so it's starting to get that piece of information about how many cubs bears are producing, what's the reproductive potential of our females. After we're done handling them, we put mom back in the den, curl her up, tuck the cubs right in next to her. We put some brush around the den to make it secure until she wakes up. She'll wake up in the den with the cubs. Everyone's happy, and they'll remain in there for the rest of the winter until she's ready to emerge. Those cubs will stay with her, as we talked about before, until the next winter, and they'll den with her as 1-year-olds. We can then, one at a time, if we're successful in immobilizing mom, we can one at a time now immobilize those cubs, which are now potentially anywhere from 40 to over 100 pounds. And obviously you can't handle them at that time without immobilizing them. But this way we can determine how many of those cubs survived to their first year, another key piece of information. You can see in the bottom right also a young female who's given an expandable collar. She'll den by herself as a 2-year-old bear next winter. She'll get a full-size collar at that point. And this way we can get information on her survival as a juvenile, and then when she eventually produces cubs, how many cubs, etc. And so we can get a very complete picture on the life history and reproductive potential, causes of mortality, survival of females in this way. Here's, for example, a family that we worked with, mom on the right, with the female with an expandable collar on the left, a male yearling with the ear tags on the right. And just this one family, for example, we've got a lot of pieces of information on. The female on the right, we had her mom collared, so we know when she was a cub. We know that she was eventually taken in our hunting season. We know how many cubs she produced in her lifetime. We know, for example, that her daughter on the left is going to be 4 years old in the den this winter. She produced her first litter last year, and we'll see whether or not she successfully raised her first litter this coming winter. And through doing this over time, we've got a really complete picture as to what's going on with our bear population. We know that there's very high adult female survival rates, and we know that this is the factor that has the greatest impact on whether we have an increasing population like we do, a stable population, or a declining population. We know their age of first reproduction, that typically it's 3 to 4 years of age. For a long time, and this is kind of an older text from this slide, earlier in developed areas. Those females that were getting their diet supplemented by human-associated foods were in better body condition and could often produce at 3 years of age. Now it's happening that almost every single one of our bears is producing cubs at 3 years of age. We know their litter sizes, so potentially 1 to 2 cubs for their first litter versus 2, 3, 4 cubs for mature females. And we also know information on the cub survival of that first litter versus subsequent litters. So for example, these are cubs here and here from bear dens we did back-to-back days. On top, it's a first-time mom, and you can see I can fit that cub right in my hands versus a mature female who's got robust cubs that it's difficult to even hold on to them. They're so strong, fit and strong. And so, you know, those mature females they produce robust cubs. They have a lot of milk to give their cubs. They know how to raise them and not get them in trouble. The young mother might produce smaller cubs. She might not have as much milk. She tends to move around as soon as she leaves the den and put the cubs in risky situation. So we know that their survival of that first litter isn't always that great, but after that first litter, pretty much every single year, they're going to successfully raise their cubs. And we also know causes of mortality. And we know that there's almost zero natural mortality in our bear population. And it's really human associated. So it's through our hunting season, vehicle collisions, and nuisance kills tend to be the way bears die in Massachusetts. And through this, over time, we can model the population, what's happened with the growth of our population over time. However, if I were to use this same model today, it's going to tell me that we've got 8,000 to 10,000 bears in Massachusetts or more. Now, I know that's not realistic, but as a manager, I can use this information that we're continuing to get from our collared bears to know that our survival rates, our reproductive rates are very consistent with what we've had throughout this entire period of time where we've had this growth in population. So we know our bear population is very healthy and continuing to grow. I'm going to show you some of the data and other things we're using with the bear collars. And so this is, for example, some of that GPS collar data that I was talking about before. In the figure on the right, you can see each one of these blue dots. That's where one of those bears, where one of the collared females was at each different 45-minute interval. So this is basically her data for an entire year, and it shows all the different places she used. The green area is the Holyoke Range in Granby and down into South Hadley. This is Westover Air Force Base down here. Highly developed areas, and we can find out how she's navigating that very developed landscape. On the left, it's a bear that uses an agricultural area. So it's using a large block of forest up here, but coming down and using the forest fragments in and around the agricultural lands. And we're using this movement data to work with a postdoc at UMass, as well as to work with DOT. She did a lot of really cool movement models that we're now providing to DOT that they can use in their planning of roadway projects so that they can help to maintain wildlife connectivity for our vast road network in Massachusetts that highly fragments our natural habitat. Can we incorporate different things into the design of their projects that will try to maintain some level of connectivity for our wildlife? Not to get into super detail here, but this is the result of one of the models she did where the areas in green essentially are, the model said, all right, how are bears able to, using that data, move through forests, wetlands, other natural habitat types versus different types of developed areas, residential areas, commercial areas, agriculture, roads, in all the places. And then we can apply the results to the landscape. And everywhere in green is an area that bears can easily move through. Areas in brown here are areas that greatly resist or prevent bears moving through. So we can get this picture of how does the modern landscape in Massachusetts affect bear movements. We can then do other models where we say, all right, we're going to let a bear move from any portion of the state to all these other portions of the state, moving through this landscape. So they're going to take a path that goes from this block of forest here and stay in the green until they get down to here. If we do this over and over and over again, where those paths combine are these dark green areas. And so this model identified areas that may be important movement corridors for bears. And now DOT can say, okay, if I have a construction project on Route 2 and it's in this area, we need to incorporate wildlife into the design of that project to maintain that connectivity for bears and other wildlife. These slides are now designed to show you what it means when we talk about people living with bears and coexisting with bears in Western Mass, and give you an idea of the number of bears these people are living with. And when you see this, you're going to maybe understand a little better why, so when the bears first will show up in your community and people are calling me and saying, Dave, you've got to relocate this bear. It's so developed here. How could we possibly have a bear living here? It's because I know how bears are using this landscape. So each one of the clusters of different dots is a different collared female that we have in this area. And you can see the entire area. The city of Northampton disappears under these locations. This is Amherst, in the UMass Amherst campus, bears living right next to that. And this is only the animals that we have collared. This doesn't take account young bears, males, and this is old data. We have many, many more bears here, so that we've now collared and have information on. So bears are in yards, they're next to roads, they're next to schools, next to playgrounds every single day here without serious negative encounters. That's why that bear in your area, I can say, it's okay. Yes, it's in a neighborhood. Would I prefer choosing a forest? Absolutely. But it doesn't pose an immediate public safety threat to have it there. And you can see, here's some examples of bears using highly, highly developed places. Again, here's Westover Air Force Base, Ludlow. This is the Mass Pike, Interstate 91, Holyoke, Chicopee, very, very high density development places with these bears. And these are all female bears that are producing cubs living right in and close to these environments. Here, for example, is the UMass campus. And so here's looking at some of the data in a little more detail. You can see neighborhoods here that this bear is moving in and amongst. This is that bear using these agricultural areas where you can see she's using strips of woods and things adjacent to these fields. This bear in green denned on the UMass campus 2 winters in a row and produced newborn cubs. And we just left her on campus, even though the den was next to one of the busiest parking lots on campus. So this just to provide some context to you when now we look at Halifax or any other community in Southeast Mass. Are there lots of neighborhoods? Absolutely. But there's also large tracts of natural habitat that these bears can and will use. And you can see from this that the level of development here is nowhere near to the level of development as some of the places that we have bears and high densities of bears living in Western Mass. The trick is now getting people to understand that what we do around our homes and how we live in a place that has bears is different with what we can get away with if there aren't bears. Because this type of habitat configuration is very common throughout Massachusetts, where we've got neighborhoods that are into forests. There's patches of forest, patches of wetlands in and around the neighborhoods in our homes and communities. And while people may be thinking, this kind of scene when they're thinking about living in their neighborhood, kids playing in the street or the backyard, a barbecue in the backyard, everything's swell and great. But the decisions you make as individuals, as in a community, in terms of the food around your homes, also determines how much it is this, how much these bears are living in your backyards, in your neighborhoods, versus living in the wild places around them. My goal as the manager responsible for managing bears in the state is to have a healthy, strong, robust bear population, but living in the natural areas and feeding on natural foods and living compatibly with the human population. I can't do this without your help. This is the biggest take-home message I want you to go home with. I cannot achieve this if you as individuals, you as communities, don't take the rest of the messaging that I'm going to give you seriously and change your behaviors about the foods you have around your homes. Otherwise, the bears will be in your neighborhoods, they will learn bad behaviors, and there will be conflict with them. As we talked about before, bears have to den because there's no food for them in the winter. So that means when they're active in moving around, they are basically an eating machine. They are a stomach on legs that's going around just looking to take advantage of any food they can. And they will take advantage of these whenever they can. And this is the cause of human-bear conflict. As I said before, it's not a bear being a bad bear. Every single bear will do this. The biggest culprit is bird feeders. I will say right away, there is no such thing as a bird feeder. These are wildlife feeders. Everyone knows it who has one, even if you haven't had a bear come. You've had squirrels, you've had chipmunks, you've had this, you've had that. It attracts wildlife of all kinds, even if they're not directly feeding at the food. The bobcat's in your backyard because it wants to prey on the squirrels and the chipmunks. The coyotes in the yard for the same reason, but also to eat the birdseed. The bear is there for the birdseed. That is thousands and thousands of calories in that tube that is an easy meal. It is training that bear that it is better to look for food in your backyard, on your deck, than it is to look for acorns, berries, ants, what have you, grass in the forest or in the wetland. It's training them to spend more time around your homes rather than in those natural areas. I circled this bear in the upper left. This is one of those bears that we collared as a 1-year-old female with her mother. Her mother had shown her to spend time and feed in backyards as a cub. As soon as she was independent from her mom, we started getting calls about this bear. She was on decks, she was getting into bird feeders, getting into problems. And I'll revisit her later on to talk about the progression of behaviors as bears spend more time in these places. As I said before, each time the bears get these food rewards, they're being trained to come to neighborhoods and houses to find food. They learn the locations and they come time and time and time again. And the problems will not end if the bird feeders are not removed. Period. End of story. They will not end. The bears will be there. So I can't stress this enough. Bears and bird feeders are not compatible. There's no good time of day to have them out. Often we'll get people that'll call us and say, oh, I take my bird feeders in at night. What do you notice about all these pictures? Daytime photos. And we know from our collaring study that most of the bears are more active during the day. So that doesn't work. So the bird feeders really have to be removed. And I cannot stress that enough. These are driving the more serious conflict that we'll talk about later that ends up having negative consequences for that animal. Another big source of food is garbage, both household and dumpsters. So for garbage, it should be stored in a secure building like a shed or a garage. It should be put out the morning of pickup, not the day or the night before. And it should be put out, if possible, in a can, not just a bag. You might say, I don't have a shed. I don't have a garage that I can do that. We have plans that are available in our offices to build these sorts of garbage can sheds. These plans were put together by Florida Fish and Wildlife. You do not have to be a handyman to follow these instructions. They are extremely detailed. They provide exact measurements for all the wood, exactly how many pieces, how many screws of what type you need, and step-by-step directions with photos. So if you or someone you know is having a bear getting into your garbage, we can provide these plans that you can put this that'll prevent a bear from easily accessing your garbage. Dumpsters can be a potentially serious and dangerous issue in a lot of different places. So restaurants, apartment complexes, retirement homes and communities, trailer parks, RV parks, summer camps, campgrounds. All these are, with the exception of restaurants, are places where you have groups of people, many individuals that are all going to that dumpster to put their garbage in. So they're going at all times of day. If we have a bear that is getting into that dumpster as well, then there's a good chance that at some point, if it's regularly feeding in that dumpster, it's going to encounter a person, and it's going to encounter a person at close range. And get startled and react defensively. And that's when someone gets hurt. They're not inherently aggressive towards people, but it's these chance negative encounters driven by these foods that can cause someone to be hurt. And you can see the bear in the upper picture. They can easily cave in these plastic top dumpsters. If the dumpsters are overflowing or whatnot, the doors are left wide open, the top's left open, it is essentially a buffet for a bear. And as I said, it puts them in potentially direct contact with people. The easy solution to this, and we've had many places in Western Mass where there's been a lot of issues at a dumpster requesting a metal top dumpster. Bear complaint. They get a metal top dumpster, it goes away. They still have to be emptied. They still have to be kept closed, etc., to make sure that they're not overflowing and whatnot, but they can resolve your issues. Most waste disposal companies will provide one on request. There is an additional cost, but it'll pay for itself in just not having to clean up trash and not having an issue with bears at your location very quickly. I'm now going to talk about probably the biggest source of serious conflict we have with bears now, and it's something that has rapidly increased in recent years. It's bears getting into backyard chickens, bees as well, but chickens are the one that have exploded in recent years. This figure probably grossly underestimates the number of backyard chickens there are in this area. And remember, this is a portion of the number of bears we have. So as these bears are being trained to come to backyards to find food by bird feeders, garbage, other loose foods around our homes, they're now encountering all these chicken coops. And they're very quickly learning that you cannot build a physical structure chicken coop that can keep a bear out. They're learning that, and they're raiding chicken coops time and time again, and they end up getting shot. That is the result of these things. Someone eventually shoots the bear while it raids their chickens. This, for example, is that same collared female that I talked about before. As she aged, she became a chicken raider. And we got 1 million calls on this one bear raiding chickens in South Hadley, Chicopee, Ludlow. Last year, we found her collar cut off and thrown in a river. Someone eventually killed her raiding chickens. And you see down here, it's the bird feeder. That's what started it. So while a lot of people will say, I don't mind seeing the bear, I enjoy seeing the bear in the backyard at my bird feeder, that's fine. But your neighbor 4 houses down has chickens. Someone 2 blocks over has chickens. And you're training that bear to come to your yard, come around homes to look for food, and it's causing conflict for someone else. And someone eventually shoots that bear. So while it's all cute to post on social media, oh, look at the cute bear feeding at my bird feeder. Yep, and that bear's going to end up dead as a result of it. Electric fencing is key. It can prevent this type of conflict, but it's important that some steps are followed to make it effective. It needs to be baited, and it needs to be well maintained. We always tell people that your goal is to design something that is going to adequately protect your bees, your chickens, your livestock from a potentially 400 or 500 pound animal. We don't recommend that anyone uses those flimsy net fencing that are just supported by fiberglass rods that are the size of a pencil. Build something that'll keep a bear out. On our website, if you go to mass.gov/bears, there's a complete electric fencing guide on the first page. And there's a PDF. There's also a tab that says protect your bees and chickens, step-by-step steps with figures of exactly what you need and how to install to make it as effective as possible. Baiting the wires with peanut butter and aluminum foil, so you're drawing the bear into those wires so it gets the shock and it learns, okay, this is something I need to avoid, so it doesn't develop these bad behaviors. So if you know anyone who has chickens, bees, livestock, please encourage them to use electric fencing. There's lots of information available on our website, and we're continuing to update this information, and there will be a lot of updates in probably the next year to the information on this website, but lots of coexisting with bears information available to you. Because these food sources are why the bear is in your yard, why it's in your community. If that bird feeder and that garbage can are removed, there is zero reason for that bear to spend time in your backyard. It'll spend time in the forest, in natural areas where it won't develop these bad behaviors. Because the cubs are taught this is the best place to find food, that boldness does increase with time. You saw the example with that collared female we have who learned these behaviors from her mother. She survived for a half dozen years, but eventually those behaviors escalated and it cost her life. And the more time that bears spend around people, the greater the chances there are of that chance negative encounter, where they're feeding at a bird feeder on someone's deck and someone lets the dog out. Now you've got a bad situation. Someone's going to the dumpster to put their garbage in the middle of the night, a bear's in there, you've got a bad situation. And so these are the type of things we're trying to prevent. And remember, these are just bears taking advantage of the free meals we provide around our homes. They're not going to change their behavior. They're just simply being a bear. And it's not a bad bear, again. It is just a bear being a bear. We have to change our behavior in order to prevent this type of conflict. remember, this is our goal. This is what I want. I want the bear living in natural places, as do many of you, feeding on natural foods that we can all enjoy having bears as part of our natural communities in Massachusetts. But again, I need your help to achieve that. So be an advocate for me. So if you see someone post on social media a bear with a bird feeder, or talking about their bear with getting into their chickens, encourage them to use electric fencing. Encourage them to take down their bird feeder. It is the best thing for you as a community and for the bears as well. If you ever need information, assistance, please, the environmental police are available 24/7 for assistance. That's the you can call our regional office in Bourne for assistance. I'm in our Westboro office and we can help you, or you can go to mass.gov/bears for more assistance. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions, comments you have.
Dave, can you hear me? Dave, can you hear me?
Yeah, barely. So someone's going to have to relay any questions to me.
Okay. Any questions for Dave? Speak up.
Hi, Dave. Is there a plan in place to collar any of the bears they have around here now?
Is there a plan to collar any of the bears that are currently in our area?
We generally speaking are only collaring females for a couple of reasons. Uh-oh. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. For a couple of reasons. One is by collaring females, they actually are the important part of the population in terms of the health of the population. A single male can mate with many females, so it's a healthy female population will ensure the health of the population. Additionally, they're the ones that are producing the cubs. So by monitoring the females, we're getting the critical information we need to understand the health and what is the status of our population. Additionally, if we collar males, and we have put collars on males, they're very difficult to keep collared. Their neck, for the females, their skull is bigger than their neck, so it's difficult for them to slip the collar off. So if we fit the collar to their head, there's plenty of room around her neck for her to grow, but it's difficult for her to slip it off. For a male, his neck is bigger than his head, so they can easily slip them off. And if you were to collar a young male, they can grow so fast that they can easily outgrow the collar. So it's just something that from a humane standpoint, it's not something that we try to do very often. And most of those bears I don't know 100% sure, but I'm 99.999% sure that those are all males down in your area. That being said, we are absolutely interested in collaring females kind of on that leading edge of our range whenever we hear about them.
Thank you.
My question now as a goat owner, I believe it's up to 11 goats so far in our area that have been killed. I have lots of electric around. I've been doing all the things. However, another goat owner whose paddock was highly fenced and electrified and whose barn was very secure, this bear has gotten in and killed her goats twice. So a bear that is already getting through electric fencing, is that bear going to go away at some point? What do I need to do to make my supposedly secure area more secure? Yeah, so we're all very worried, and we don't want anything to happen to the bear. We like the bear, but we don't want to lose our animals.
Yeah, and so this is the challenge once bears learn these behaviors. Unfortunately, once they learn the behaviors, they tend to repeat them. To be honest, the attacks on chickens, beehives, very common and very preventable. And so we try to work with the public on that as best we can. Attacks on larger livestock are far less common. For example, it may happen in 2 to 3 places in the entire state in a year. And we'll get reports of a bear in a couple of towns attacking larger livestock. And then unfortunately, someone ends up shooting the bear as a result of it. And that's typically how it ends. And then you don't have those incidents in an area again because it's that one animal that's learned that behavior. So if this bear continues to perform this, it's a distinct possibility that someone will end up shooting it. It's not something that we as a division are advocating for. It's not the outcome that obviously anyone wants. It's the reality of, unfortunately, what happens here. In terms of preventing it, you're right. Unfortunately, too, if a bear has learned to go through electric fencing, it can be slightly less effective with time. I encourage you to look at that electric fencing guide just to see the steps and the recommendations that we have there in terms of the spacing of wires, how many wires you can have to make sure that the bear is going to encounter a wire. So simply adding another wire or two can ensure that the bear is actually going to encounter that electrified wire rather than being able to potentially get through or over it without encountering a wire. Baiting those wires. So that can be one of the biggest things. Taking the aluminum foil, as I said, something else that's conductive, and putting something that smells, has taste to it. And the idea, again, is to draw that bear's nose to that wire so it gets the full shock there versus, if it's climbing over it, takes it in its furred, insulated chest, it might not feel that as much. So it's trying to make those things as effective as possible. If you just have single strand wires, you can try installing livestock fencing and electrifying that. And there's a complete design available in that guide for using that type of fencing. So it's kind of just making sure that your fencing, there aren't any places that a bear can climb over, climbing it or getting into a shed or something, or a coop or barn that isn't electrified. The electric fencing goes around 3/4 of it, but it just connects to the barn. Perhaps the bear can break into that barn without having to encounter the electric fencing. Making sure there's no tree that it can climb and just drop down into your corral. So just trying to do those kind of things to make it as good as possible. And unfortunately, the bear likely has developed these behaviors and is going to maintain these behaviors. At this point, I'm hoping that, that bear could enter the den at any time. And I'm hoping he does so. So at least for the time being, those behaviors stop and it gives people an opportunity to try to, improve their husbandry to prevent it from picking up those activities in the spring.
Hi, I heard a rumor, and I don't know if it's true, that one of the bears in our area was killed recently in Kingston. Do you know anything about that? Shot, I think. I heard by an off-duty police officer or a retired police officer.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
They wanted to know if you heard any rumors that one of the bears down here had been shot by possibly an off-duty or retired police officer in Kingston.
There was a bear, and so this is now several months ago. There was a bear that was attacking livestock that was shot. I believe it was by the homeowner. I apologize. I don't remember off the top of my head if that was Kingston or not. But there was one reported incident where a bear was shot by the homeowner. We believe that bear survived. It was seen by our staff and the environmental police that evening. It got up and it moved off. And we continued to get reports of that bear. So as far as we know, that happened. As far as recent time, I'm not aware of any other instance where a bear has been shot anywhere in Southeast Mass.
Anybody else?
Can I just say, I do want to say one thing. One of the comments, obviously, in relation to the bear in your area and the bear in Hanson, I've been contacted by hundreds of folks. We've seen social media posts and whatnot. And obviously the general refrain is relocate the bear, relocate the bear, relocate the bear. And I just want to address why that isn't an option for us. As I just talked about with this bear that has learned these behaviors, there's nowhere in Massachusetts where I can take that bear where it won't do the same exact thing for another community. So I can't take a bear and move it out to the Quabbin because, one, they don't stay where we drop them. So 99.9% chance that it is going to move into a community around the Quabbin where there are livestock and it's going to perform those same behaviors. So obviously you wouldn't want me moving a bear that was causing problems or anything else causing problems somewhere else in the state and move it to your community. It's the policy that unfortunately those animals can't be relocated. The only animals that we relocate are animals that are in a highly developed area, in downtown Worcester, in downtown Springfield, some other city. And it's simply to resolve that immediate situation. It's not because of the animal's behavior is problematic, but it's likely because it's wandered in so far to be involved in a vehicle collision or cause some other safety threat. So we move it out, we move it right nearby, we release it and let it go again. But it is not to resolve a situation where a bear is causing conflict. People say, move it to Maine, move it to New Hampshire. Likewise, they do not want our conflict bears. It's just not an option. So it's not because I don't want to help that bear potentially, but I just simply cannot transfer that type of animal somewhere else in the state.
Hi, I'm under the impression that the people whose goats were killed twice, their fencing and their barns or everything were very secured. They were brought up to code, say, of what the bear should be stopped by, and it wasn't stopped by that. And most of us, most owners anyway, do not own a gun to protect their animals, and that's the problem. Because, I mean, the bear has to be shot while he's attacking the livestock. You can't chase him down later, apparently. That's why I don't understand. These people did what they were told to do. They had a secured barn, and yet I don't understand. Is it our responsibility at this point to do something with the bear? Is that what you're telling us?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch almost any of that. Can you relay?
We're going to try. So her concern is that the homeowners whose livestock has been attacked twice had set some safeguards on the shed, which were defeated by the bear. So her concern basically, is it the homeowners or the farmers' responsibility now to take action and to take matters into their own hands, so to speak, in dealing with the bear? Most people don't own a gun, so what would be the course of action?
Right, and so that's the situation here, where that bear broke, repeatedly killed goats at that property, separated by a couple weeks. They have electric fencing. I've been told, I had not seen the property myself, but I've been told that it has a very secure barn that the bear broke into this last time to take the livestock. This home is right in the very developed center of Hanson. There's homes immediately adjacent to it, and there are laws that allow someone to kill an animal that's causing property damage. We would always encourage that people try to address the root cause. So if you have a chicken coop, for example, and you don't have electric fencing and a bear breaks into it, if you shoot that bear, it doesn't solve the problem. You need to be protecting your livestock. In this case, the person has made attempts to protect their livestock. We've tried to, through the environmental police, pass on information so they can improve their electric fencing design. So hopefully, if the bear does return, again, baiting the wires and whatnot so that it is more effective. But again, that person could shoot that bear if they legally could. That being said, in Massachusetts, there are laws that control where someone can use a firearm, or perhaps the person doesn't have a firearm. And so I know the homes, the roads are close enough to that house where they would not legally be able to use a firearm. So they wouldn't end up with a wildlife violation if they were to shoot that bear. They're going to end up with a firearm violation. So obviously very serious in Massachusetts for public safety. So a lot of times unfortunately, these people can't act, which I believe is why, and the fact that the bear entered the barn, broke into a barn, rather than just simply taking livestock in a pen, why the Hanson police chief said what he said, that they were going to kill the bear, to basically attempt to help the citizens of Hanson deal with this issue that is causing them serious conflict. I will say at the same time, I've since talked to the chief, and as your chief said at the beginning, I came to a meeting in the spring to try to let police chiefs know that yes, you're going to have increased sightings of bears in your area in the coming years. Try to get an understanding, providing some of the same information, much shorter, to them about what are the threats from the bear. What do we need people to do to try to prevent conflict? What is a situation where we or the environmental police are going to help respond to a situation? And what is something we just need to encourage the public, these coexisting messages? I did that, and we did that because it's a learning curve for everyone in Southeast Mass, including the local authorities, because they haven't had to deal with bears in the past. So people are learning kind of on the fly what they can be doing. I've since talked to the Hanson police chief, and he brought up on his own in our last conversation the idea of getting less than lethal rounds. So beanbag rounds that they can potentially use should they encounter the bear again, potentially raiding livestock, not doing something that poses a public safety threat, and try to haze the bear off of that, to try to discourage them from being around without having to take the lethal option. So we're continuing to work with Hanson, trying to work with you as a community to get this information out about how to coexist with these bears, to hopefully maybe alter that animal's behavior, to not have to kill it, to not prevent this conflict from developing in the next bear that's coming through. But this is an evolving process. We're going to be having a similar meeting, I think, next week in Hanson, where we're going to try to talk directly to that community. Basically the same talk that you heard today, but trying to get that message out to as many folks as we can to try to prevent these sorts of conflicts from happening.
Anyone else?
Do we just primarily have the 3 bears floating around?
The question was, do we primarily have 2 or 3 bears floating around in that area?
How do we know that it's only 2 to 3 bears?
Well, is it only 2 or 3 bears in your best estimation?
Yes, we think so. So, for example, when the first bear started arriving in Southeast Mass, I was able to track that from the first reports came in Franklin and Rentham, and then it moved. Now I've got to get all my town straight where it went to next. But basically, from one community to the next, and then the calls disappeared in Franklin and Rentham, and it moved to the next town. It was there for a day or so, left and moved to the next town. And we basically, just from the reports that came in, social media reports, calls from police, we were able to track that bear basically all the way up to Scituate, settled back down in Plymouth, one animal. And so originally we thought it was just an individual animal. And then we started getting reports of 2 bears simultaneously in different locations. So, okay, it's 2 bears. But we do very much still think it is, even though it's been, you've seen them all over Southeast Mass, that it literally is an individual or 2 that are wandering town to town, accounting for all of these sightings.
I'm a beekeeper and I'm the former president of Plymouth County Beekeeping Association. In 2018, my husband and I were preparing our apiary in Rockland, Mass, up off of Beach Hill Road, Luan Farm. My husband is a Maine hunter. We found bear scat in the woods that spring, 2018, and later on in the season, diagonally across Route 58, one of our club members lost their hives. So I'm not trying to excite or cause whatever, but there have been bear in our area now that I know of personally for 5 years. And as an anecdote, he hit my hive. He hit one of my hives. I had just put formic acid on my hive. He got a snout full of formic acid, left the hive, and left. So hopefully that's one bear that'll never touch a beehive again. We'll see.
Yes, absolutely. And I actually came and spoke in Hanson, coincidentally, to to whatever the county beekeepers association is there. Right about that time, I gave a presentation to the Beekeepers Association that was targeted to them, that provided a lot of information on electric fencing, because we know that beekeepers are a particular community and that's an activity that bears target. And quite frankly, that was a little bit before the chicken thing has exploded. So there's no question that if you're participating in beekeeping, that electric fencing message is definitely for you. I can't stress it strongly enough that anyone with bees should be using electric fencing. But absolutely, to your point that there have been multiple bears, yes, for the past 3 or 4 years. And this is what prompted us in the spring to come and talk to the police chiefs. That's before these 2 bears moved in, that we've had multiple bears each of the last couple years that have wandered through. You'll recall the bear that was named Boo Boo in the press that wandered through Southeast Mass. There was another bear that has wandered through. Last year, there were 2 or 3, and we know those bears were killed because they were hit kind of high profile on a couple of major roadways. And so we know this isn't just these 2 bears. There have been other bears around. It's become more regular, and it's going to become increasingly regular. Again, our bear population on the eastern edge of our range is rapidly increasing in Worcester County. Those are the bears that are now dispersing out of that range and now wandering through both the southeast and the northeast Mass. And so again, it's going to be typically these young males still. I don't think I said it at the time, but females tend to use a portion of their mother's range when they disperse. So they don't disperse very far. And so it can take a long time for our actual established range where we have reproduction occurring to move anywhere. So, and there's a lot of barriers too, a lot of highways that slow down the progression of that expansion. So I don't anticipate that you're going to have wholesale growing bear population in your area in the coming years, but the mere presence of these dispersing bears is going to be a more constant situation. You know, right now it's centered on your community. It could be 4 towns away next year where a bear happens to settle or what have you. But it is going to be an increasing thing. And that's why we're having presentations like this, is why we're talking to Hanson to try to get the messaging out about coexisting with bears and what people need to do to try to prevent these types of conflicts from happening.
Anyone else?
I have another question. You want to?
Yeah. Hi, I have another question. Can you hear me this time? Yes. Okay, thanks. I didn't feel like I quite got the answer to my last question. Is it our responsibility to not try to prevent the bear from coming, but take care of the problem when it does come? But in other states, problem bears are removed. And why is that not being done in Massachusetts?
Why are we not moving the problem bears in Massachusetts?
Yes, that was the question.
Yeah, and again, it's the same reason, because it's going to transfer that problem to another community. Massachusetts is far, far more developed than most of our adjacent states. So you've probably seen Northwood Law and those kind of things. At the same time, the bears that they're moving on Northwood's Law, I've seen it a couple times. They've moved them out of Concord. I know the biologist personally who's done that work there. And again, that's just a bear in a tree in Concord rather than a bear that's causing conflict. And again, it's simply because it would not be fair to another community in Massachusetts to take that bear that has learned bad behaviors in your area and send them somewhere else. I mean, just for an example, I thought of this analogy this morning. If a human was breaking into homes in, say, Pittsfield and stealing things, instead of going to jail, would you like him to be moved to your area to potentially do those same things and released? No, obviously you wouldn't. And obviously the circumstances are different with this bear, but I would then be liable for any damages this animal caused if I moved it somewhere else. I'm not going to do that to another community. Unfortunately, we don't have places in Massachusetts that are remote enough, are big enough where there aren't individuals that live there. And it simply wouldn't be fair to them to transfer those problems elsewhere.
Dave, she just wanted to clarify, when she meant relocating or handling the problem, she meant having DEP or MassWildlife euthanizing the animal, not relocating it, euthanizing it.
Okay, I apologize. Yeah, and occasionally the environmental police do. So, for example, the environmental police responded the other night to that goat incident. And there's a distinct possibility that animal would have been put down if it could have safely been able to. Again, as I said before, when we talked about the homeowner potentially putting the animal down, it's law enforcement still has to do it safely. And this is the challenge in a lot of developed places to being able to do this, is that, discharging a gun in some of these places potentially creates a greater public safety risk than actually dealing with the animal. It's the same when local authorities arrive to do something. We deal with this with coyotes all the time in urban areas where, even when a coyote has bitten someone, yes, we would love for that animal to be removed, but it can be very, very difficult to do it safely where you're not creating a greater public safety threat to remove it when you're doing so. In terms of these bears that are causing issues, if this bear posed a public safety threat where we felt that it had the potential or the likelihood of injuring someone, it's entering the living spaces of homes, it's acting aggressively towards people, that is when we as an agency have made efforts to remove bears in the past. And if that were the case, we absolutely would make an attempt to remove this bear under those circumstances as well, if a public safety situation existed.
Anyone else? Oh, we've got a couple more questions, Dave. Sorry, hold on.
Sure.
Hi, can you tell me exactly what the definition of a nuisance bear is? It seems to be escalating. First, it was repeatedly harassing livestock, then it was killing livestock, then it was not being able to be scared away by hazing, and now you're saying it has to enter a human dwelling? What exactly is the definition of a nuisance bear? And why are homeowners responsible for depopulating the bear when it could be safely trapped and taken care of by your group?
Yeah, from our standpoint, most of the quote unquote nuisance behaviors that we're talking about can largely be prevented by improving husbandry, by using electric fencing, et cetera. And so that is basically our position as an agency, is that these preventable forms of conflict be addressed by doing that. If we simply were to come in every time a bear was causing property damage somewhere in the state and trap and kill that bear, we would be killing hundreds of bears in Massachusetts every single year. And basically it would be giving the public a get out of jail free card. As I talked about in great length in the presentation, these behaviors are driven by the public. I cannot say that enough. I cannot solve these problems, and killing the bear doesn't solve the problem. As someone just stated, there have been multiple bears in the past couple years in Southeast Mass, and that's going to be a continual thing. Simply coming out and killing these bears when people don't want them around isn't going to solve the situation. It really is, it's very important that people learn to live and prevent these conflicts with bears. From our perspective, it has been our policy as a division, and you may disagree with that. I understand that we absolutely will take action when it is a public safety threat. But that's basically where it has been. An individual's definition of what is a nuisance, some people consider simply a bear in their backyard to be a nuisance, and they would ask for it to, and do ask for it to be removed in those circumstances. Others, it can very depend. I very much, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to dismiss the impact on people when an animal attacks their livestock or what have you. At the same time, I think people would be very upset if we were to take on the policy, because this is one bear in your area. It is a lot of bears elsewhere in Massachusetts that are causing property damage. I've had phone calls from people this week and from different communities where people are saying, my chickens were just broken into. A police chief over here saying he's going to kill it. You should come and kill this bear. So are we going to kill every single bear in Massachusetts? Is that what people want? I know that's an exaggeration, but unfortunately, and one, we don't have the capacity to do that. And it's not something we're going to do. And you may disagree with that position, but our position is that, public safety, we absolutely will intervene. These other things, they can be prevented by people taking appropriate steps.
I think the problem here is the fact that this is a new situation. It's not that we want every bear in the area removed, but we have a current situation that needs to be dealt with. These people, I don't have goats, I just have bees and chickens. I was lucky. These people have not had time to bear proof. They weren't ready for it. And they're being castigated as murderers because they want the bear gone. No, we want the one bear dealt with. And everybody is going to have to do their due diligence and beef up their stuff, and we'll do that. But we didn't know that the bear was going to come this week and kill all of our goats. I mean, they're being blamed for something that's not their fault. Now, going forward, if they don't do something about it, it is their fault. But right now, it's not, and they're looking for help. That's the bottom line. They need help.
Right, and I think that's quite frankly what the position of the Hampton police chief was, to help his constituents when these situations arrive. And the same with the environmental police who responded on the evening when that happened. We're not ignoring the situation. I don't know what to tell you at this point. What I will tell you is that many people don't want that to occur. They don't want any action. And while you're saying, that person is being cast as, a murderer to do that, I'm telling you, I'm being cast as a murderer very regularly. You would love to see my inbox and my voicemails over the past week in relation to this, even though I have very little to do with the public statements that were made. So as I said, we're constantly working through these situations with authorities, where I'm in basically daily communication with the police chief, with our other staff. And again, it's an evolving situation. But at this point, we do not, as the agency, have plans to immediately attempt to capture it ourselves.
One last question, and then they have to have their normal.
Thank you. We're in Pembroke, and the bear came and got 2 of our goats. One we had to take to the lab because we had to test it for rabies. And then my 2 children went out to feed the animals, and the bear was 40 feet away from where they came out from the chicken coop, and they were scared, and they ran up on the roof. That same night, the police were driving towards the bear in the center of town, and the bear was not scared. So that to me would be a nuisance.
I have a question that might work for you, Chief, is what is the protocol? What is the protocol if this encounter happens with somebody?
So if we respond to a call for service and the bear is actively engaged in attacking a goat, God forbid attacking a child or a human being, we will take action. But again, like Dave says, we have to take into consideration that deadly force in a thickly settled area, because we need to know where the backstop is. Because if that round goes for the bear and God forbid hits somebody else, we're going to be in big trouble. So we're going to be.
That would be effective.
I'm sorry?
That's why trapping it and moving it to a place where it can be safely euthanized would be an effective way to deal with the problem.
Well, again, like Dave said, they have their protocols, and But I mean, that's, so for our community, you know, we had calls last week of it at the mobile estates, and you know, just going around, like Dave mentioned, going to the bird feeders and stuff like that. I think we have to work together. You know, we don't have the capabilities to trap the bear or euthanize it, other than just like a wild animal. If it's actively attacking someone, you know, well, that's Fish and Wildlife. Then I'm sorry, I can't give you a better answer. But that would be our protocol. That would be what my officer would be tasked to do. All right, Dave, I'd like to thank you for the informative and educational speak, and I'm sure you'll have probably just a good turnout and enhance it. I'm sure you'll have some more tough questions there. Thank you again.
I'm sure we will. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Ken, you want to do your thing? Okay. Ken, you want to say a few last words before? Sure.
Okay.
Anyone have any time they want to stay around for anything, or do you have to go? If you have a few minutes, I was going to mention about what. If any of you have about 15 minutes or so, I'd like to tell you about a little story that my wife and I have learned from bears in New Hampshire. If you have some time, you want to hear it. We go up to New Hampshire every year. We have a timeshare in a town called Lincoln. And in Lincoln, I don't know if anybody ever been up there or not, there is a show put on, and it's called the Clark's Bears Show. Has anyone ever heard about it? You went up there. Well, anyway, last year we were up there, not this past September, last year we were up there, and the owner, Mr. Murray what's the name? Mary Clark, he had 2 baby cubs presented to him, which were out of the area. I thought one was from Vermont, but I'm not sure. But there was 2 baby cubs that were given to the Clark family. We didn't exactly see them, but his granddaughter held the 2 baby cubs in the palm of her hand, one in each hand. That's how small the baby cubs were when the Clark family got them in. Well, this past year, the bears now 2 years old, and they're in the show. When he received them, there was only a few ounces they weighed. This past year, not year, but when we saw them in September, they now weigh over 90 pounds. That's how fast they went in. Anyway, he had the 2 bears in his show, and it's amazing what bears can learn. Baby bears, 2 years old, can learn and put on a show. Well, in the show, the bears were asked to take a basketball and throw it into a hoop. They do it, he said, maybe 1 out of 15 times. The bear did it the first time and missed. The second time, the bear threw the basketball. This is a basketball. Threw it and went into the hoop. He then took the bear and his daughter. The show was run by Murray and his daughter. This year he had his wife involved because of the bears being small. They didn't know if he needed 2 more people or not. Well, anyway, he gave the orders for his daughter to take the scooter and have the bear ride the scooter. The bear got a hold of the scooter, put one foot on it, and rode it all the way around the tent 3 times. Then he let the thing go and hit the wall. Well, Mr. Murray asked, "Where did you get your license?" And he looked at the bear and he said to us, "In Massachusetts." Well, anyway, the other acts they had for the bear likes ice cream. So apparently nobody's interested in real bears. The bears like ice cream. So to keep the bears going and doing what they're supposed to do, they would, after doing the acts, they would each get to lap the ice cream. So someone asked him what type of food they feed the bears. And he told us that bears eat dog food. He said the bears don't need it. They don't know they eat dog food, but the bears are eating dog food. And then with the dog food and what they get for nutrients and all the stuff they have, he said the bear will live a lot longer with them than if it was in the wild. He claimed to tell us that the bears in the wild live anywhere from 5 to 6 years. Now, that was a little different than what he said. But this was bears in New Hampshire, what he was telling us about. His bears last many years. He just had one bear who did the show for many years, and I think that he said it was 50 years old, and it's buried right out there with all the other bears that did shows. They're all buried on the Clark property, and he has like a little cemetery for them. So anyway, when it comes time for hibernation, his daughter wakes up one of the bears because it's her birthday. She has a birthday cake. The bear eats the birthday cake, then it goes back to sleep. So no, I don't know about candles. But anyway, we learned a lot about the bears through going to the bear show. And it's in Lincoln. And if you ever had a chance to go to Lincoln, go to the bear show, because it's amazing what they can train the bears to do. But when they're small, his wife said that the bears are in the house. So she says that it's a little difficult to train the bears to do things because they see things in the house they won't play with. So last year we saw them. We go up there, and there was the show we saw in September. She said that it was now time that the bears go outside in their pens, get out of the house, because they were making a wreck out of the kitchen. So the bears now are outside, and they're supposed to be doing their hibernation time like they normally do. She only wakes up one of them because of the birthday, and then they get back to sleep again. But we enjoy going to the bear show. It's amazing. I said it's amazing to know what a person can do to train bears to do things like that. So.
That's a very famous place. I mean, that's not training post. That's very famous.
Yes. Yeah. Have you been up there too?
I live in Woodsville.
You live where?
I live in Woodsville, right down the
Oh, yeah. You live right near the place.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's what we learned, and we enjoy going to the bear show. And that's it. The last thing I'll tell you is that when the show was over, Mr. Clark went up outside, because outside there's places the bears can go if you want to see them. He was up on top of one of the bear platforms. He was sunning himself, I think. Well, one of the bears got out of the pen, went up, climbed up there, and sat in his lap like that. It was lapping his lapping his arm. The other bear saw that, and that bear came up, and it was lapping his thumb. Yeah. So the bears can be taught, I guess, if by the right people, to be trained, and they stay there. But that's what we learned. Right?
Thanks, Ken.
Well, thank you all very much for coming, and as I say, we have TRIAD every month, first Tuesday, unless there's a holiday, and everyone's welcome.
Thank you.
Have some coffee. Have some coffee.
Have some coffee.